Hello and welcome. I'm Karen McNenny, author, mediator, co-parent specialist, and divorce consultant. And this is the Good Divorce Show, where we don't just talk about how to get divorced, but how to be divorced. Divorce is not a weapon, it's a tool. And when used well, it can be a tool for transformation. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. Hi, friends. Thanks for coming along for the ride. I am sharing the behind the scenes journey of the Good Divorce book. Oh my gosh, I'm not even holding the book. Well, at this point in the story, it hasn't even been born. It's still this idea in my head and this book proposal and this outline. So where we left off was I got a traditional publishing deal. And I said yes to that around March 1st of 2025, middle of March. And they wanted that book to come out 14 months later, which evidently all of this is very fast in the publishing world. And I was really only going to get 9 months to basically write the book. And once again, I knew I was going to need an architect and a contractor. And as I shared in the last episode, I'm not an architect or a contractor. I don't have an MFA in creative writing. I fancy myself a writer. I love storytelling. I've done a lot of writing over the course of my life, but this is a whole huge, giant undertaking of 250 pages and 16,000 words or 60,000 words. I can't even remember anymore. Massive. So I went back to the original organization, Write It Great, Andy Earl, and his team who helped me craft the book proposal, which we did in the course of 2 months. And it worked. I got a book deal. So thank you, Write It Great. And the writers I worked with at that time. And so I went back to them and I said, I can't face a blank page. I've got a son graduating from high school. I have a daughter who's getting ready to go to Europe for school. I'm still seeing divorce clients. I have speaking gigs as a business consultant. I'm still trying to earn a living. I don't have an advance big enough to goodbye, see you in 6 months, nor can I do that. I'm raising children and running a business, and I'm a single income household. I don't have a spouse. I don't have a partner who's going to backfill, even to walk the dog or make the meals, buy the groceries, and kind of keep me afloat during this time. So I leaned in again and hired Write It Great. And they said, well, typically we would work alongside the author for 6 months to get that whole, book kind of outlined and fleshed out. Think of it like the skeleton. And then my job is to flesh it out and dress it up and put on the earrings and tell it what to say. I said, I don't have enough money for 6 months. I don't even have enough money for 3 months, but I'm willing to take on some debt because now I feel like a startup. Now I feel like I'm building a new business, and that's what you have to do. You got to invest. And thank goodness there were friends who literally, I did kind of a capital campaign, a very subtle, quiet GoFundMe in order to get this book off the ground, because otherwise I would not have been able to do it. And I told them, I can't afford you for 6 months, but I'll take you for 3. And we'll outline 1 chapter every week. It's about 12 chapters. Ended up 10 chapters. Same thing. We talk about it. They put some architecture together. I review and change that as we then talk about chapter 2, and then rinse and repeat in chapter 3, and rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat. And then it was mine. And I had a due date. So we started that work right around April, May, June. And then I had the book June, July, August, and I had to turn it into Wiley. My first deadline was September 5th, right after Labor Day, exactly a year later from when we sat down and said, I wonder what this book wants to be, right? A year later. I just find all of this so auspicious. So exactly a year from when Virginia and Corinne, they were my writing coaches, had come to Missoula to outline this book proposal. a year later, I had to turn in that book. And I had another existential crisis, and I went away in another camper van. But this time, I bought the van. I bought Stan. Oh my gosh. I didn't know it was going to go this way, but it did. And I spent a lot of June, July, and August, mostly July and August, traveling the Northwest to the beach, to the mountains, to Oregon, to Washington, and with Moab, the golden retriever. Let's not forget Moab, my trusty companion. And I just hit campgrounds. I had a few speaking gigs out on the road. And I thought, if the only way that I'm going to be able to totally focus and do my part of fleshing this baby out in 3 months' time and getting the dialogue and the internal monologue and the feeling and rearranging the order and cutting things out, it's the only thing I can do. Like, I have to mega focus on that and not have any distractions with my laundry or my kids or my parents or any of the lovely things that happen in Missoula, Montana, especially in the summer. There is always a better offer, for me at least, than sitting alone. And as it turns out, writing is a very solitary activity, which has not really ever been my jam. I've gotten much better. And I talk about it in the book, the distinction between being alone and being lonely. And I've really had to work on that over the years. So I went out on my own and I worked on this book, and it got turned in early September. And once again, we had until Thanksgiving. And then that's when I got my next person. I got Sunny, and she's my developmental editor. And she happens to live in South Africa. So we had all of these time change things. She's a day ahead of me. So I always felt like I was 2 days behind. And she took the manuscript that I turned in. She would go through a chapter, make a bunch of notes, send it back to me. And it's so funny because you think, there's my book. What could we possibly change? I've spent so much time on it. It's been incubating for 9 months. Oh my goodness. Developmental editors, so important. And she helped me to see, as she said, it was very drafty, right? It was a first draft. It was my 4th draft, but handing into her what seemed like a first draft. And so she was always sending chapters back to me, and I was making changes, but we just kept moving forward because the process was that she would review one chapter, give me notes, and then either I would take her feedback or not. But it had this kind of domino effect until the very end, and she finished it. And then I had all of her comments, and I realized the book is, it's not in the right, it doesn't have the right structure. It has the right content, but it doesn't have the right structure. So, kind of at the last minute, we were supposed to turn this in December 1st. And in the middle of November, I realized I needed to tear the book apart. And we were headed into Thanksgiving weekend, again, auspicious, about the same time that the book went out and got shopped and got discovered. A year later, I'm alone. The kids are away for Thanksgiving, daughter's in Europe, son's with dad, everybody's gone. It's just me and Moab in my house in the dark of winter, which is what happens in Missoula. And I realized I don't know what this book wants to be. So I chopped it all up. I didn't print it out and chopped it up, but I went through the entire book and outlined it, color-coded. These are personal stories. This is case study. This is commentary on the industry. This is nonfiction, how-to. These are quotes from experts. And then I laid every chapter out so I could see kind of what was in each chapter and how long. There's one chapter that was like 2 chapters that needed to be cut up. It just, once I saw it on the kitchen counter, it just became so clear. And immediately it was like, oh, now I see it. And I saw 10 new chapters. So I made 10 new little pieces of paper called the love story, the system, the kids, the home, the community, the grief, the future. You'll see it in the book. The chapters that it is, I laid those chapters out on the dining room table, and then I'd go back to the kitchen counter, and then it was like a buffet. Okay, here's all the things that I would take from all the different places and put it in the chapter 1 column. And then I'd go back and I'd pull, what do I think is in chapter 2, which was the system, right? The chapter 2, which a lot of this was at the end of the book originally, kind of the commentary and the why. And it's not just my story. It's not just how to do it. It's like we have a system that doesn't serve families. That's really why I wrote the book. To help families and to help them bypass the destruction that can happen as soon as, honestly, attorneys pick up divorce and turn it into a weapon against the opposing party, which is someone you had a love story with and someone you have to raise your kids with. So I took 2 days, tore apart the book, sewed it back together, laid it out, could see it clearly, took all of that commentary around the system, put it into one chapter and moved it to chapter 2. I'm like, no, I want this up front. I want people to know. It's like the thesis statement of what informs all of this, why we did it different, what I learned through that process. And the book is not about how to get divorced. The book is how to be divorced. Again, it's how to unravel your relationship, end your marriage, renovate your relationship, get your family operational in 2 homes and really functional. And I had about 12 days before this book had to be turned in to the editor. And I knew they were starting to get a little nervous because they knew I was making a lot of changes. And I got word, we only go through this book once. That's what your developmental editor is for, each chapter, right? This is the program I got as baby author. You take your notes or you don't take your notes, you clean it up, you turn it in. She can't go back and go through it again. Well, I've subverted the system because sometimes that's what you got to do. And I took an 8-minute video talking Sunny through the whole, showing her the table. Mind you, 30% of the book was left on the kitchen table or on the kitchen counter. And that was the drafty part. It was more parts about my spouse. It was parts about other bad relationships. It was parts about my family of origin. It was just things that I had to write through, but that didn't need to be in the book, that didn't further my cause, which I think is something that we always really need to think about when we're writing memoir, is can the book have the same message without, some of this content? So I would say about 30% was left on the kitchen counter. But now I had to do all new transitions. I wanted to add case studies. One of the things that Sunny told me, it was like, these big chunks, they just feel like personal essays, like in your diary. And I'm like, they are. That's what it is. I set out to write a memoir, like strictly a memoir initially. Publisher really wanted to get me in the nonfiction category. They're like, people are looking for answers, Karen. You have great ideas of how to help people. When they walk into their bookstore, they're going to go to self-help. They're going to go to relationship. They're not going to go to memoir. Nobody knows me. Maybe that's the next one. But they're not going to care about my personal story. They're going to care about getting help. So I took all those little long essays and I chunked them. And that's what opens 8 of the 10 chapters, is like a personal reflection. So I could still do that creative writing piece, that memoir piece. But if you're not interested in that, you just skip it and go to more of the how-to. And then all the how-to stuff started to come into its own. It's called the good guide. And visually through the book, you can just skip to those places like, oh, here's how to write a public service announcement. Here's to write a logistical thing. Here's how to, manage gear across 2 homes. Here's how to think about the age of your kids and appropriate schedules. I asked Sunny, can I do this? Can you help me do this? What are you doing for the next 12 days? It's Thanksgiving. I will be canceling my holiday. I will be retreating to a friend's house in the woods. And I will basically rewrite this book if you will go back through every chapter and work alongside me. And she said, yes. she also said, Karen, a lot of authors, writers, author, I'm still growing into the title. She said a lot of authors don't, they say they want a developmental editor, but their words are so precious. They don't really want a developmental. They don't want to cut everything apart. They don't want to do, this is a ton of work. It will absolutely improve the book. And if you're willing to do it, Karen, I'm willing to come alongside. Can you start sending me chapters every day? And I said, not yet. I think I need to take what is on the dining room table in all these little pieces of paper. And now I have to go back to the original digital manuscript that we're working from and chop it up and get them all digitally into the right categories or into their new chapters. And then I have to go through every chapter word by word and rewrite the transitions, make sure things are in the right order and that it makes sense. And once I kind of have everything laid out and I go back and I start on chapter 1, then I will send you chapter 1. And while you work on that, I'll work on chapter 2. Same thing, start at the beginning, word for word, new transitions, things that got cut out, need to put back in. Does it make sense? Then adding these personal essays, the reflections of my journey at the beginning of every chapter. And I was going to include case studies from clients that I've worked with. And in the end, what I decided to do was to pull stories from the podcast, from the Good Divorce Show, and take segments of transcripts from the podcast and place those between chapters. Again, the original intent of the podcast was to broadcast how it sounds, what it looks like. I come from the performing arts world. I come as a creative, and it's through storytelling that we see things in a new way. So I wanted to bring those stories, these just little lovely nuggets from the podcast. And then we put a QR code next to each of those little transcript bites so that you can go right to the podcast and hear the entire interview. So I was excited about the structure. I buried myself for 12 days and did nothing but the book. And I had a dear friend who walked the dog and fed me and stoked the fire and gave me a beautiful place to be so that I could do that. I just had so many angels along the way. And Sunny walked side by side, and we finished it and turned it in on December 5th. Then came the copy editor. Once again, I'm like, this book is in great shape. I've been through it so many times. It is a little dangerous because you start thinking, did I say that? I don't know if I said that. Is that in a different chapter? Because I move things around and it's all in my head. And now it's been in my head for, 10 months. It's just, it's a bit of a brain mess. So off it goes to my copy editor. And I'm thinking it's in pretty good shape. And she starts sending back her edits. And there are, anywhere from 10 to 20 corrections on every page. Grammar, sentence structure, typos, rearrange that I wouldn't have seen, and this is the beauty of the traditional publishing house and what Josie Bass gave me is they gave me a team and these editors were all paid for to get the book in shape. It's also about the time that I started to get my managing editor who had been with me all along, Moses. And Moses was in India. There's other people in Indiana. And his job was to make sure I was hitting all of my deadlines and that he's wrangling everybody so that it gets to print on time. Because if we miss our print date, which was a little bit of a concern when I was tearing the book apart and putting it back together, I'm like, no, I've got this handled. You're going to get your book on the day that you want it. Don't worry about that. And they did. And then we went through and did all of those copy edits. And approving those, all looking good. Then it goes to the design team. That's the next level. And now it's January 2026. And the design team is now taking all of these independent files of all the chapters, all the transcripts, the essays, and laying out the book the way that it's going to look on the page. And I remember when they sent the first galley of, here it is, here's the title page, here's the outline, here's all the gray boxes, here's the essays, here what the, like now the book really visually made sense. And I again, I'm like, oh my gosh, there it is. There it is. And then there was another layer of like, ooh, once I read that, I'm like, actually, we have 5 paragraphs that are duplicated that I didn't catch before, but I can't be trusted at this point. My eggs are scrambled, right? It's just, I've been in and out of these words so much for so many months. I can't tell what's up and down. And sure enough, they were able to go back in, make some big fixes and changes, which is unusual at that stage because they've already started to lay out the pages that are going to be printed, and they print them on these big pages. They're wanting to write the index. The table of contents is written that tells what page number things are. So if you start moving stuff around, you're going to mess with all of that. But there were some big things that needed to change before it went to print. And I was really grateful that we were able to do that. And then we looked at the galley one more time. And simultaneously, I'm sending the manuscript out ahead of time. Not the pretty finished one, but before Christmas, kind of the big Word doc of this is the right content. And it went to a number of experts in the industry and other authors and writers and people who would write blurbs. And you got to, as an author, go out and find people who are going to, write praise about your book, early praise, the early, how they say it's on the back of the book, it's on the inside cover. Like these 10 people said the book is great, so please buy it. So that was happening. Those were all getting designed. Sadly, they didn't get included in the first print. Just an oversight. So many details, so many spinning plates. So we need to sell enough books to get a second print. I think the first print was about 2,000, right? Little baby author. But together, we're going to dazzle this publisher. This book is going to find its life. It's not going to be on May 19th, its release date. And we're going to talk about that in my next fireside chat, tea time with Karen. The book got through all of its final stages, laid out, and ready to go to print, which was probably early March for a May 19th release date. And as I sit here today, we're about a week before the book goes live. But it's already been out in the world. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and the journey now and what I have to do as an author and what I'm inviting you all to do as fellow advocates in this process, because I'm no longer a writer. Now I'm a marketer. So thanks for coming along for the ride. Part 3 is up next week. This comes from chapter 7, titled The Community, Circle of Support. I'd always had a hard time being alone. Even before David, I'd filled my life with constant activities and people on top of working full time. The divorce left me with too much time alone. As I grieved, I leaned into my people. They knew me before David, before kids, and so I sensed they would help me re-know myself post-divorce. Writer Maggie Smith notes, when you lose your person, it's critical to have your people. Oh, my friends were the people I could rely on for emotional support. There's a sense of emotional security that comes with good friends. I knew there was almost nothing I could do that would drive them away, and vice versa. Being able to lean into that unbreakable bond reminded me of what a healthy, functioning relationship could look like. My friend, Elizabeth, was one of those shoulders I cried on. Oh, I'd call her when the grief felt too big to contain, and she'd simply listen, while I sobbed into the phone. I'm supposed to be strong, I remember saying one rough evening. I'm the one who decided on this divorce. I shouldn't be falling apart. Says who? Elizabeth's voice was gentle, but firm through the phone. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be a mess. Stop working to convince everyone and yourself that everything is all bubbles and rainbows. It's a shit sandwich. We all know that. So just eat it and feel what you're feeling. She connected me to the very heavy reality of my new life and gave me the permission slip I needed to fall apart, at least every now and then.